Hello, hello, I'm Kats, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be talking about my fusion plan for getting the latest Fragment summon champion in the game, and a very, very much needed champion for the Ogryn tribes, and that is Khamir Skaldai. Now, the timing of this fusion could not be better for those looking to progress in Faction Wars normal mode and or hard mode, because this guy is exactly what this fusion has been lacking for years and years at this point. A tanky, healing, support, revival champion for the Ogryn tribes to replace the Geargrinder that all of us normal folk who don't have the Void Legendary Bellatar Mage Slayer have been using to support that faction. So you can probably already tell we have a lot of high praise to say about this guy, but nonetheless, let's go through his kit and talk about why he's going to be so good for the majority of people. Starting with the A1, the single target attack, 2-hitter. Each hit restores some destroyed max HP equal to 5% of the heal, which is okay, but more importantly, each hit will heal all allies by 5% of his max HP. So you want to build him with a lot of HP, and then you're going to get a 10% heal every time, or 10% of his max HP heal every time he uses his A1, which is great because he has 20,000 base HP. So you get him to 70, 80, 90,000, and you're going to be healing a lot of relatively or comparatively squishier champions to full most often, just by using your A1. Super solid. Unfortunately, there's no books that go into the heals. It's just damage for some reason, even though he's not a damage dealer. On the A2, 3-turn cooldown when booked, 25% turn meter fill with increased attack and increased speed. Great solid support ability on a 3-turn cooldown, and of course the bread and butter ability in this regard. The 4-turn cooldown when booked, full AoE team revive, 50% HP, 50% turn meter, plus increased defense and strengthen on everyone. Basically Ursula the Mourner's ability if it was an actual revive that was non-conditional, cannot be wasted when people are not dead, more or less, which I really do like and really do prefer. I prefer that revivers, unlike Tagore as an example, can actually use the revive only when people are dead. That way that it's more auto friendly, because I hold the belief that this game is meant to be played predominantly on auto, but I digress. Next we have, or lastly, we have the passive here. So whenever an ally is killed, this is a great thing, but it will heal him by 25%. So every time someone dies, he gets a quarter of his HP back, and it will fill his turn meter by 25% as well. So you basically have the mastery, like not emergency heal, but timely intervention, I believe that's what it is. So you basically have that built in. So you get turn meter when anyone dies. So you're almost an instant turn, especially if everyone else on your team dies. You come back, revive them, because it's not going to be on cooldown necessarily, because of course it's not going to be wasted by applying the buffs. Then it will also heals all allies for 10% of his max HP and fills their turn meter by 10% after he receives some healing and some turn meter. So essentially, if anyone is already alive, that you get some fraction of a heal, basically the equivalent of the A1 more or less. And so you benefit, the people who will happen to still be alive will benefit as well, and only the person who dies will not see the benefit there. And then we have a speed in all battles aura by 20%. So again, super solid champion, decent amount of healing that's going to be used fairly often. If people aren't dying, you're really going to be cycling through the A1 a couple of times and then using the turn meter fill, which will help everyone cycle through their turns faster, because of course turn meter fill plus increased speed. So for the most part, he's going to just be a buff turn meter fill champion plus a healer, and then as needed, especially with synergizing with his passive, he can heal himself, most importantly, to keep himself alive. So you may or may not necessarily need to run him in regen gear, and he can revive the entire team and kind of get the ball rolling again, and he can be a great aura lead basically anywhere that you want to use him. So I think he's going to be decent, predominantly in PvE. That's where his kit is screaming utility for me, but I can also see him being some sort of siege Ogryn tribe forced type faction thing, just to see if people want to use him for that, put him in Mercurial and Stone Skin or Stone Skin, and then kind of be annoying if you have a good team of annoying Ogryn tribes around him for siege. Once again, diving into the stats, 20,000 on the HP, really healthy chunk for his support, 1,300 on the defense, so that scales pretty well as well, 110 on the speed, so great, he can be built relatively fast, and then he has an extra 10 resistance above the base of 30, because of course he doesn't have any debuffs in his kit, so you're going to want to build him in a pretty standard approach of high HP, high speed, and ideally high resistance. You don't necessarily need to go resistance, but generally speaking, your reviver should not be CC'd, otherwise they can't really revive. They don't want them, you don't want to be stunned, provoked, and petrified or whatever, and so it would behoove of you to build him with resistance. That way he can actually stay alive and do his job. So yeah, pretty much all my cards cards are out on the table, but this guy for me is most certainly an A. And I tend to shy away from the term must get, but I do think if your goal is to progress really far into normal and or hard mode faction wars and or improve your capability in restrictive content in the future, or in the present and the future, I do think you should really at least consider going for this guy. It is a fragment summon once again, so it should be relatively or comparatively easy to complete compared to a hybrid style and or traditional style fusion. So it's the easiest and most accessible form because you just have to collect enough of the fragments. So if you've been convinced, then let's talk about how to get to this champion by hopping over into the Love of the Spreadsheet, which will be linked in the description box down below if you'd like to access a copy of this for yourself. And so we have a breakdown of the Fusion event calendar, and we have a fairly straightforward Fusion, all things considered, with a little bit of caveats, as we'll come back to a little bit later. But we have the standard 4 dungeon split. We have no event dungeon tournament, despite the event dungeon being open. Technically, it's going to be closing, I think, during or maybe near the end of the Fusion. We have 2 Classic Arena tournaments. We have a Champion Training tournament. We have a Champion Chase tournament, which is most likely going to be 2x Voids because we just had 2x Ancients. Prior to that, we had 2x Sacreds. So it's either going to be 2x Primals, maybe, or 2x Voids. But I'm leaning more towards 2x Voids, but we'll see if that is going to be the case. 2 Gear Hunters, which is great because we don't have 3. We have 3 Gear Enhancements. We have a Champion Training event, and then we have 2, count them, 2 Summon Rushes. One of them has 20 fragments, and the other one has 15. But the main thing to take away from this whole fragment summon is that there are, if you add all of these up, minus the 10 or the 20 for winning a tournament, there are actually 130 fragments up for grabs, which is a great thing to draw your eye to, because that means if you really want to min-max, i.e. just get 100 fragments, you get to skip 30. And the main things that should draw your eye when you're thinking of calculating 30 points, the Champion Chase itself is worth 15. The second Summon Rush is worth 15, and then the base Summon Rush is worth 20, i.e. you can skip 2 of these shard events as long as you get 5 somewhere from across all 3 of those events, as long as you do, provided you do everything else. And one thing they did show in the actual calendar itself was that basically every single event and tournament is going to have increments of 5 when it comes to the amount of fragments, meaning that you could try to go early on in the Champion Chase and just get the first 5. You could go early in the Summon Rush and try to get the first 5, or either of the Summon Rushes. So it's up to you where you want to chase those points, but it's not going to be like there's going to be a node of 5 and a node of 20 or something that might screw you over if you're trying to kind of min-max and get to 100 relatively easily. In terms of my particular approach when it comes to this fusion, I do like to exceed the minimum, so I'm going to be targeting around 110, 115. It kind of depends on some caveats, but essentially I want to pull some voids because I'm kind of in the middle ground between, approaching Mercy and being fresh off of Mercy. So up to 30 to 40 voids, give or take, is a good risk for me, just to see if we happen to get a void legendary. And if we don't, assuming it is 2x voids, of course, if we happen to not, then we're getting closer to Mercy, which is kind of a win-win situation. And then I would do one of the Summon Rushes. And so basically, it really depends what the champions are for the what I assume to be progressive chance events. So if there are good events on the first one, I will probably go at least 7 Sacreds worth, assuming these milestones are correct. But if it's really good, there's like a bunch of champions that I really want in there, maybe I go up outwards up to 10 Sacreds, depends. So there's kind of a caveat there, but that's why I said my goal is to get either 110 or 110 of the 110 or 115 of the fragments, but I'm not going to try and go for all 130, even though that would be beneficial long term for me trying to go for High Mother Maud. For anyone unfamiliar with this spreadsheet here, over here on the right hand side, we have a list of all the milestones for each of the events and tournaments. Anything marked with an asterisk means it's a predicted value based off historical precedent, and they will be updated once they go live in game and we know the actual values. But these are generally speaking going to be relatively accurate, again, based on historical precedent. But of course, player M could be higher or lower than historical precedent, so bear that in mind. These are not gospel, they are predictions. And I will say that we have a relatively clean layout in terms of the overlap, or what I like to call pinch points, the overlap between champion training and dungeon events. So you have the entirety of Dragon and Ice Golem on their own, and then champion training overlaps with Fire Knight and with Spider near the end. So it's an interesting way. Usually it's kind of more, champion training will touch multiple things or have its own free day, and whatnot, but these are kind of surprisingly isolated, which is not the end of the world. But at least we get to hit the ground running right out of the gate, focusing on Dragon, whilst there is a Gear Hunters active as well. Unfortunately, maxing out the Dragon event itself, or Dragon tournament itself, will not get you all the way out to the 3,700 required for the Gear Hunters, so you're gonna have to do something else, start spending gems if your goal is to go for that. Of course, as we talked about earlier, you know, if you wanted to do more of the summoning overall, you can then in exchange drop 15 fragments elsewhere from other events in the fusion. At the bottom here, I also put my energy plan, which is just how I plan to spend my energy, not a prescription for how you necessarily should spend your energy based on each day, but just kind of a guideline if you're curious what my unique approach is to completing fusions. I'll be back in the game. Let's talk a little bit of strategy when it comes to my approach to the fusion, starting off with my supply count. What I like to do, for those who don't know, is I like to summarize my supply count at the beginning of fusions and the end and compare the two. That way I can show you guys how an endgame free-to-play spends the resources to get fusion events, because generally speaking, people do think that they cannot do all fusions, but I'm trying to be living proof that you definitely can if you put in the work and the effort. But I digress. So we're going to draw the line at, let's call it 7,900 on the gems and then 541 million on the silver, because that's where I was at the beginning of the day when the fusion started, of course, earlier today. And I've earned some silver just by running a little bit Dragon here and there throughout the day. As we talked about with the calendar, the only events that are already live right now are the first Gear Hunters is alongside the Dragon tournament. However, I'm not going too hard on either of those because, as you can see there in the main page, CVC starts tomorrow, at least a couple hours at the time of this recording. So of course, I'm going to be saving all of my refill energy from the previous days, for the reset, from all the quests and whatnot. I'm going to be saving it for after CVC starts, and make sure I'm kind of double dipping in terms of that. So we're going to hold off a little bit tonight. So yeah, I am super excited to get this guy. This is probably one of the more exciting fragment summons in recent months, and I do think he's going to be a big help to me. Like I said, currently, in Faction Wars hard and even through normal mode in Ogryn Tribes, I've been running a rare champion, a void rare nonetheless, but a rare champion as my primary healer and reviver, and it's a single target 50-50 on a 5-turn cooldown, and now on a 4-turn cooldown when booked we have a full AoE revive plus the healing on the A1. So it's just much better champion, and it's given out for, you know, air quotes free through a fusion, which is just fantastic. So me personally, big fan of this fusion, but I want to hear from you guys. Do you agree with my grade of an A+? Do you think he's overrated, or do you think he's properly rated? And of course, are you going to be going for him to get him on your account, and what are your plans for using him if so? That's going to do it for this fusion plan video, and as always, if you did find this video helpful, be sure to hit that like button down below. It will just help out the channel, and feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well if and only if you're enjoying the content overall on this channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.